Hi everyone, welcome back to Intermediate Ukulele with me, Matt Stead. Today's video could arguably be the most important one we've looked at so far. Today I want to introduce two concepts to your ukulele playing: accent and syncopation. These two concepts are kind of like the hidden magical ingredient in your ukulele playing, which takes it from sounding kind of ordinary to really, really nice. We're going to have a look at both of these concepts, what they mean, how to interpret them, and more importantly, how to add some of these little bits to ukulele playing, little bits of salt and pepper to make it taste that little bit nicer. Have a listen to the end of this 12-bar blues piece. I'm going to do it first of all completely straight, and then I'm going to add a little bit of accent and syncopation. And don't worry, I'll explain what both of those terms mean in a lot of detail in a minute. So just straight, this is kind of how it sounds, just the last few bars. It's a bit dull, isn't it? Now just a subtle bit of accent and syncopation. And we'll break that down in a minute. I'm actually going to teach you how to play that piece, the full piece, and we'll start to add these terms in. So what is accent and syncopation? Let's take one at a time and really break it down. So an accent is quite simply when we draw attention to a particular part or a beat in a piece of music. So there's many ways we could do it. We could use some of the skills we learned from the beginner's course, for instance, a rolled strum. Notice if I put a rolled strum on beat 1 here, it pronounces that first beat. You'll hear it louder and more clearly than the others. I'll show you what I mean. Here's straight. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now if I put a roll on 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Can you see how that roll is drawing your ear? It's adding an accent to beat 1. So quite simply, it's a way of just kind of making a beat stand out and making it much more interesting. There's loads of ways we could do it. Do you remember that touch strum that we looked at in the beginner's course where we just touched the G string on the down strum? Every time I do that touch strum, I'm bringing your attention to that beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Makes it stand out, right? It doesn't have to be on beat 1, it could be beats 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's anything that's drawing our attention to a beat. There's an even simpler way which is used in a lot of ukulele strums, and that's to just alter the volume of our strum. And a common thing is to push a little bit harder on 2 and 4. We're going to practice this with that blues piece in a minute, so don't feel you have to do it now, but just as an example. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, push, 2, push, 1, push. Can you see how every other beat I'm just pushing that bit harder? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's adding an accent. Now that altering the volume is the most common way to add an accent in music. And if you have a look at the diagram up in the top corner, notice we have a little arrow pointing to the right. If you ever see that arrow above a chord or a note, it means to hit it that little bit harder to give it a little bit more volume, therefore accenting that beat. So if you saw a G chord written and it had an accent on the first beat, you would push harder on that first beat. It's that simple. As humans, we crave those accents in music, but also in the natural world as well. It's really interesting. If you think about the ticking of a clock, we describe it as tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. We have two separate descriptions, don't we? We have a tick and a tock. So that tock is putting an accent in rather than tick, 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 tick. We describe it as tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. And there's some really interesting scientific experiments they did in the 70s where actually most clocks, including even old grandfather clocks, really just go tick, 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 tick. It's the same noise over and over again. But the human need to hear something more interesting and to put order into the world, it hears it as two different things. I think that's really fascinating. So in music, every time we add an accent in, it's really satisfying to listen to. So how about syncopation? Syncopation is something slightly different. If we think about accents as drawing attention to a beat, syncopation is when we disturb the beat. We do something to our music which means that it doesn't feel like just a plodding beat, very strict and formal. So, for instance, one of the things that we do to syncopate music really naturally, and loads of people do it even without thinking when we play music, is to swing our music. And I've got a whole video on this in my beginner's course. I'll put a link in the description. But notice if I just strum up and down with no swing, it's very straight and on the beat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Every beat, including the ands, are exactly the same length. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Notice when I swing it, the up strums are actually slightly quicker and the down strums are slightly longer. We're actually playing slightly behind the beat. This is straight. And swing. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So the down strums are slightly longer. That's a way of already just syncopating slightly because we're moving the feel of the piece away from the beat, slightly behind the beat. Kind of really strongly syncopated music is things like ragtime. There's a few things happening there to disturb the beat. There's little chunks. I've got quite a strong swing happening, and sometimes I miss a beat completely and just do an up strum. So syncopation is when we disturb the beat and we make things a lot more interesting. And just like with accents, humans love syncopation. That's why when it really came along strongly with things like ragtime, people loved it because it makes you want to dance, it adds rhythm and feel to a piece of music. And our ears crave that. It's like ear candy for us. So when we're playing ukulele, we don't want to do everything totally straight. We want to add that ear candy in. It's really, really important. Let's do it. Let's play a piece of music and start to add in some accent and syncopation. We're going to look at a really simple 12-bar blues. So let's have a look at 12-bar blues in the key of G. 12 bars just means there's 12 bars or 12 measures. They both mean the same thing. And those 12 measures tend to be played again and again and again. This format is used for literally thousands of blues songs and also rock and roll songs, so it will probably be instantly recognisable to you. Let's have a look at the structure. First of all, we've got 4 measures in the first line. We have G, a measure of C, and then 2 measures of G. We're just going to strum down straight eights. That means 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and for a measure. Now notice the function of these chords. I want to start explaining this as we go along this course because it really helps you to figure out songs and learn them by rote, learn them by ear. So the first chord that we play is G, and that's your home chord or the 1 chord. It just means the first chord in the key of G. G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp. So G is the 1, okay? So we start with the 1 chord. Then we have C7. Now this is acting as the 4 chord because if I count up from G in the key of G, G, A, B, C would be the 4 chord. And we're playing it as a C7 because it gives it that nice bluesy edge. And the 4 chord, that C7, its function is just to add a bit of variety to the song, take it somewhere new, but not too extravagant. So we have G. A bit of change with the 4 chord. Then we go back home to G for 2 measures. Now we need a bit more change. So in the second line, which I'll put up on the screen now, we have C7 for 2 measures. Again, a bit more change. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Another 1, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Then we go back home to G for 2 measures. Fantastic. The last line, we have the 5 chord coming in. That's D or D7. Quite simply, that means the 5th chord in a key of G. G, A, B, C, D. So D is the 5th note in the key of G, or the scale of G major, if you want to think of it that way. And we're going to play that as a 7th. And the 5 chord has a really important function. The 5 chord makes you want to go back to the 1 chord. It makes you want to go back to the start. It adds tension. But what blues players realised was, rather than going straight back from D7 to G, like this, if they squeeze the 4 chord in the middle, that's the C7. Don't worry if this is all going over the top of your head at the moment. We'll come to the accent in a minute. But by squeezing the 4 chord in, so we have 1 measure of D7, 1 measure of C7, it's like a bit of delayed gratification. When you go back to that G, it feels even more comfortable, like we finished this song. And we can also use that D7 at the end of a piece of music to make you want to go back to the start. So notice at the end of the line, we have another D7. If we're going back to the start of the song again, we would play it. If we're not, we would just finish on a G. So let's hear it with that D7. So the bottom line, the final line, is D7 for a measure, C7 for a measure, G for a measure, and then this cheeky D7 makes you want to go back to the start. And that's often referred to as the turnaround. Let's put the whole thing together. Join in with me after 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and G. C7 and G. Okay, next line we have C7. And back to G. Next line's a bit trickier, quicker changes. We have a D7, C7 next, back to G, and then our cheeky turnaround D7. And we can go back to the top. There we go, 12 bar blues in the key of G. Now, let's start to make that much more interesting by adding in those accents and syncopation. So we're going to start really simply by adding in a little bit of syncopation, and we're going to do something that you probably already do all the time in your ukulele playing really naturally, and we're going to swing it. So rather than just strumming down as we just were, or even up and down like this, we're going to strum up and down, but we're going to slightly swing it. Okay, so instead of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, we've got 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now, I've got a whole video on this in my beginner's course, and I'll put the link in the description. But it's just strumming up and down. You can think of it as running, 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 down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. But notice, if I slow it down in slow motion, it's almost like my hand gets stuck in treacle on the down strum, and then I have to come up a bit quicker. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. It's almost like that hand's a bit lazy, gets stuck down here, so I have to come up a fraction later. Now, by doing that, don't worry about the theory behind this, but we're playing ever so slightly behind the beat on that up strum. That up strum is slightly later than it should be, and when we speed that up, it gives us a sense of rhythm, and that's why swing music was so popular, because it wants to make people dance and it's much more interesting. Let's play the whole of the progression through now with that swing rhythm. Join me after 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and G, C7 and G, C7 and G, G, and your cheeky D7 turnarounds. Lovely. Okay, so how about we add some accentation in now, or adding an accent to one of the beats. Let's try adding an accent on beats 2 and 4. And what we're going to do is we're going to push slightly harder on those beats so the strum is slightly louder. Now, it doesn't mean you've got to really whack your ukulele sort of like that. You haven't got to do a big down strum or anything like that. All it means is that on beats 2 and 4, you just push that little bit harder with that index finger as you come down. It's not a faster strum, just literally pushing harder on the strings. Notice if I do a nice light one, not much volume, same speed, but pushing down a bit louder. So just on a G chord, that would sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Should we give it a try? Let's try the whole piece through with that little bit of extra volume on 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. C7. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now don't worry if you didn't get that straight away. You can rewind to the start of that and try it again and again. But notice, it's got swagger now. Almost makes you want to do that cheesy status quo thing, doesn't it? Rocking all around the world. Rocking around the world? Oh, I don't know. I'm embarrassing myself now. But notice that we're adding a bit of swagger, a bit of interest. You want to dance to it. It's really nice. Okay, let's take it up another level. Let's try adding an extra note to our chord to actually change the chord quality on certain beats. This is going to add an accent because it's going to draw our attention to particular beats. I'll explain the theory behind the actual chording in just a minute, but let's just have a look at the practicalities of it first. What I want you to practice doing is playing a G chord, your bog standard, but then we're going to add our little finger, or pinky if you're American, I think, to the 3rd fret of the A string. So off, on, off, on. So off. So it's coming right underneath that 3rd finger. Now remember, when I tell you to play chords, I generally try to get you to play this side of the fret because it's where you're going to get the cleanest sound. But when I'm doing this kind of thing, I will generally bring it back slightly just to give enough room for this little finger, because otherwise he's kind of got nowhere to go when he ends up over here. So I bring the chord slightly back and he's going to come down here, off, on. Now we want to put that on beats 2 and 4. So we're going to try just strumming up and down first. And we're going to put that pinky down, or your little finger, on 2 and 4. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. How fantastic is that? We've got syncopation and some really nice accenting going on here. If you want to add the volume on 2 and 4 as well, you can do, and that's totally cool and it sounds ace. But if that's too much for now, just try adding your little finger in. And if you can't do the little finger thing, just add the volume. That's cool. We're adding accents any way we can. Now, when we change this G major chord and we add this little finger, we're actually changing the chord name. We're actually playing something called a G sus4 now. The reason it's called a G sus4, or a G suspended fourth, is we're replacing this note here in the G chord, which is a B, with this note here, although we're using our little finger, which is a C. Now in the key of G, B is the 3rd note, G, A, B. And what we're doing is we're changing that G into a C, which is the 4th note, G, A, B, C. So it's almost like we're taking this B and we're sliding it along. That's why we call it a suspended fourth. We've moved the 3rd across so that it's like a suspended fourth dangling in the middle. If that goes over your head, Totally cool, don't worry about it, but it's just interesting. So when we add that little finger, we're actually changing the chord into a G sus4. G, G sus4, G, G sus4. Can't say it quick enough. Okay. Now, we can do exactly the same thing to a C7 chord. We can turn this C7 into a C7 sus4. Oh my goodness, that sounds like a complicated chord. Let's have a look at the practicalities first, the mechanics of it. What we're going to do is we're going to put our finger, and we're going to use our second finger on and off the first fret of the E string. Off, on, off, on, on. Let's practice that for down up strum. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fantastic. Notice I've had to move this finger back a bit as well. Normally I would place it there, but I'm moving it back a little bit just so that I can squeeze in that finger over the top. Why is it called a C7 sus4? Well, we're playing a C7 chord, and we're taking the third note in the C chord, which is E, C, D, E. That's the third note of the scale. And instead of playing an E, which is this one open, we're playing an F here. So we've taken that C, D, E, and we've suspended it. Oh, we've moved it up into a fourth. So that's why it's a C7 sus4. You don't need to know that now. If that just kind of makes you think, oh my goodness, too much theory, doesn't matter. Just play it and enjoy it. C7, C sus4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Now, if any of this is too tricky for now, just give it your best. You can always just add the volume for now. But let's give it a run through. Every time I play a G, I'm going to add that little finger on beats 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Every time I play a C7, I'm going to add that second finger on 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, back to G. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do it in slow motion first. Join in after 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. G. On, C7. On, back to G. On, C7. Add, G. Add. Now these chords just play as normal. D7, C7, G, and D7. Okay, excellent. Should we try that sped up slightly? If you're struggling with that, try it round loads and loads of times slow until you get an idea. And then we can try adding it in. If you want to put that extra volume on 2 and 4, you can, but don't stress it at the moment. Let's give it a go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Great. Now rest as normal, D7. Fantastic. Really tricky, but doesn't it make a real difference? We've got accents and we've got syncopation because we have our nice swing strum. Now this next bit's where it gets really exciting. We're going to add a chucked strum in. And I did a video on this just a couple of videos ago in the intermediate course. Again, I'll put the link in the description for you down below the video. By adding in this chuck, we're kind of adding both an accent and syncopation because the chuck draws your attention to the beat. And because we're kind of disturbing the beat, we're changing the feel of these particular measures. We're actually disturbing the beat and we're creating a sense of syncopation as well. So by doing this next bit, we're adding both accent and syncopation, which is like win-win. It's absolutely brilliant. It's going to sound like this. I'm going to show you how I do it. First of all, we're going to break it down. First of all, I'm going to do something quite unusual. I'm going to get you to turn your ukulele upside down, and I'm going to get you to tap on the back. Here's the rhythm that I'd like you to tap out. Just have a listen the first couple of times and then see if you can join in. Notice that I'm going down here for the third beat just because it adds a bit of texture, a little bit of a different sound. Okay, now either out loud or in your head, I'd like you to count the following. Running, chuck, walk, running. Running, chuck, walk, running. Running, chuck, walk, running. Running, chuck, walk, running. A few more times. Running, chuck, walk, running. Running, chuck, walk, running. Okay, now we're going to break that down, turning the ukulele round. So we're going to do the different parts. Now remember, I'm really keen on not being prescriptive about whether you're strumming up and down, because strum patterns get people really tight. And they get really kind of tense and it's not natural sounding. Take the running chuck, for instance. And I'll show you how to do it in a second. It doesn't matter whether the running is up, down, or down, up, or down, down. As long as we have that rhythm, that's the most important thing. Just to make it easy on those that do like downs and ups, the rhythm that I am doing, the pattern that I'm doing is down, up, chuck. So let's just do the down, up first. We're going to count that as a running, so just down, up strum. Running, running, down, up, and I'm just doing this on a D7. I'm just doing the open D7 chord to make it easier. You could do this D7 if you prefer, but we're already doing quite a lot, so I figured this one's a bit easier. So let's try that one more time, a down, up strum, running. Now let's add the chucking. What I want you to do this chuck is to take your little or your third fingers, or I do both for insurance, and place them somewhere on the strings to the right of that D7 chord. Notice, to make things easier in a minute, I'm keeping those fingers on the D7 chord, and then I'm just lightly placing these fingers on. Now the important thing is these two fingers here, my ring finger and my little finger, they don't press the strings, they just lightly touch them, so you get this sound. That's your chuck, right? Now, if I was to press with these fingers, I get this, which I don't want. I don't want the sound of a chord, I want a nice clean, and that's your chuck. So if we put that together now, we have a down, up chuck, or running chuck. Running chuck, running chuck, down, up chuck, down, up chuck. Just try that round a few times. Down, up chuck, running chuck, running chuck, running chuck, running chuck. Well done, guys. So that was our running chuck. So all we need to do to finish that pattern is walk, running at the end. Walk, running. Now the reason I called that last bit walk, running, notice that the walk is slightly longer than the running. Walk, running, walk, running, walk, running. Okay. Again, it doesn't really matter whether you do up, down, up, down, whatever you like. Because of the way my hand has landed from that chuck, which is down here, I tend to do the next bit as up, and then I do an up, down. Up, down, walk, running, up, down. So just practice that with me. No chuck here, just fingering the D7 chord, and I'm going to go up, down. Notice slightly longer on the first up, walk, running. And that's why I put these walks and runnings in. It helps you count it. Walk, running, walk, running, walk, running, walk, running. Okay, let's put that all together. Let me do a couple first so you can get into the rhythm of it. Down, up, chuck, walk, running. Down, up, chuck, walk, running. Okay, or running, chuck, walk, running. Running, chuck, walk, running. Bit slower. Running, chuck, walk, running. Down, up, chuck, up, down, up, chuck, up, down. Run. that's it. We've got that lovely syncopation going on now on that lovely D7 chord. We could do exactly the same on the C7 that follows. Running, chuck, walk, running, running, chuck, walk, running, running, chuck, walk, running. And then we'll go back and just do a normal G. And then on the final D7, let's do another one. Running, chuck, walk, running. So if I play that bottom line through, have a listen first and then play along with me. Running, chuck, walk, running, running, chuck, walk, running, normal G. Running, chuck, walk, running. It's tricky, isn't it? It's really tricky. Take your time. If you don't get this straight away, it's totally cool. Just really take your time, and it's going to eventually really add some lovely texture and some accent and syncopation into your playing. Let's try it all together. Just that bottom line. 1, 2, 3, 4. Brilliant. Should we try putting the whole thing together? Let's give it a go. So we're adding all these accents in on the first 2 lines, and then on the bottom line, that lovely accent and syncopation. So right from the top, the whole thing. Let's give it our best shot. 1, 2, 3, 4. Next line. Here we go. Here's that D7. Obviously, anytime you want to finish, just hit that G chord. Because remember that D7, it's a cliffhanger, and if we end our song there, the crowd, if we have one, would be going, the song's not finished, when do we applause? There, we can applaud. So really try and get into that, practice it a lot, and you'll see that you can add it into all sorts of music. Don't feel you have to just use that during blues pieces. If you're playing any song which has a G major chord going on for quite some time, just try adding that little finger down on the 3rd fret of the A string to turn it into a G sus4, just for a bit of variety. Okay. Same with the C7. Try it on all sorts of songs and you realise it's a really lovely technique. And that accent and syncopation just lifts the song. It really does make the difference between your ukulele can be sounding quite boring and kind of, it feels like a song can be quite flat sometimes. We've all been there. Just this little bit of salt and pepper just lifts everything, makes it so much more interesting for you and for any listeners, which has got to be a great thing, right? And finally, don't forget to experiment with that volume as well. One of my favourite players, and in fact, let's face it, it's most people's favourite players, isn't it, is Jake Shimabukuro. And he's famous for doing these kind of fast strumming patterns, isn't he? That kind of thing. But notice, even though he's strumming quite fast, there's still some alteration in the volume. Have a listen to some Jake pieces and see if you can spot how some of those strums have a bit more volume on certain down or up strums, and that's creating that lovely accent, and he's adding syncopation as well. See if you can spot it. And later on in the course, we'll look at other ways to add more accent and syncopation into our playing to make things much, much more interesting.